Hello, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Mary. So our panel is about estimations. Do you have a delayed project at hand? Don't worry, you're not alone here. Estimations are difficult to get right, and could we really get this right reliably? Or do we even need them in a team or in the company? Today, we'll have Daiany, Dominika, and Amir on how to solve the problem of estimations. If Hi, and before we get started, let me introduce our panelists. Daiany is a DevOps analyst and engineer for Kuehne and Nagel's online solutions department. She joined the company in 2011, and she's had different roles from being a developer, analyst, to being an engineer on the infra team. Dominika is a software engineering manager in Vector Technologies, leading teams with empathy and managing projects with radical honesty. She's passionate about agile hardware management. Amir is a software engineer and a tech lead at Google. He leads a team focused on developing products to help small business owners build their online presence and connect with customers. Without further ado, let's get started. First question, a warm-up question for the panelists. Give us an example of how you've gotten estimations wrong and what are the dire consequences that you have to handle afterwards. Amir, maybe you can get us started.
Wow, tough warm-up. Okay, yeah, this is a story of very early in my career when I gave an estimate. We had a user that was shouting and screaming about a feature that was missing in a new system we'd built. And I was young and keen and ambitious, a junior developer at the time. So I jumped up and I said, hey, look, I've got an idea for how to solve this, and I can get it done in 2 days. No one had even asked for an estimate. I was just so keen I had to provide it. So I got to work right away, and I ended up working on it all week, all of that weekend, and actually all of the following week and most of the week after that. So it actually took me 14 days in the end. But in that time, I'd been working flat out. I'd solved some really hard problems, most of which I hadn't envisaged at the start. And I was actually really excited. I'd worked really, really hard to get something ready, and I knew that I'd done a really good job. And I kind of assumed that everyone else would feel the same way once I delivered this, and now that it was done and that feature was there. But I was wrong. I was very wrong. Everyone was very unhappy. My manager was unhappy, and the user wasn't happy as well. And the reason for that was I had said it was going to take 2 days. It took 14 days. There were a lot of things that might have been done differently if I'd given a better estimate at the start. If I'd said at the start it was going to take 2 weeks. And this is the point where I really realized how important estimating is in software engineering. You really need a good estimate to set the right expectations, and like a longer but more correct estimate is a lot more useful than a shorter but inaccurate estimate.
That's definitely a good takeaway. Dominika, I see you're pretty happy to hear that. Anything to add here?
Yeah, actually, it's not exactly about estimations, about why you need some buffers, because even if everything is okay, everything can get ruined. So I have a story when we were working with my team of software and hardware engineers on a medical electronic device, and everything seemed very okay. We were ahead of time. And one day, late February, I call my local prototypes manufacturer and I say, hey, I need 20 prototypes in 2 weeks, like usual. And he says, no way. It's New Year in China. And Chinese New Year means 2 weeks vacation. All manufacturing stops, people go home. So you can't order from there in this time mostly. Turns out all people from Poland who didn't know that turned to my local manufacturer for rescue. So even though we weren't ordering from China, we got delayed and missed an important milestone with client. So really, estimating is super important, but also adding some buffers for your estimations makes everything safer.
Cool. It seems like getting estimate right? It's definitely a challenge. But do you think it's still worth it to go through that process? Daiany, what do you think?
Well, it is worth it because it allows us to at least have this common conversation on what do we really understand and what's the task to be done. And of course, sometimes when the process becomes too long and too stressful, let's say it's tiring, then you might feel like, oh, not again, I have to estimate, or what's this for? But that always it would always be necessary to answer the question when something is going to be done. So there is no way that any stakeholder involved will be happy without having at least a slight idea. So of course it can be very tiring and boring at times, but at least the fact that it allows us to sit together as a team and talk and try to get deeper understanding of what's the task to do, I think only that already makes it worth it, no matter how tiring everything around can be. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. In my experience, as you mentioned, we're working with other stakeholders. Whenever we mention estimates, then it gets confused with the concept of deadline. So, Dominika, what is your thought on that?
Yeah, that's the exact problem we all need to solve. So make it clear if we are talking estimates and just a bit guessing and basing on our experience. And when we are talking about binding deadlines, I said the rule that I shout at anyone at my company, I say estimations is not declarations. And as long as we all don't understand that, the conversation is just not going to work. Because if you meet somebody at a coffee machine and just ask them, hey, this little feature, is it difficult? And your friend developer says, no, it's okay. I think it's easy. We'll do it in like 2 weeks. And you add that to your timeline as a manager, it like makes no sense. But if we don't make it clear for everyone that, okay, now we need to talk deadlines and now we just estimate, we won't go anywhere. So this is crucial.
Anything to add, Amir?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. It's very important to echo that message that estimates are not the same thing as deadlines. Just, maybe point someone to the dictionary and look up the definitions of the two. They're very different. But, it's also important because, if we treat them that way, we can sometimes end up providing an estimate that matches, the deadline or the desired date. And then sort of working backwards from there, which is not the ideal state.
At this point, I would like to add a point from my experience. And of course, as you said, Amir, it's very important to know, to have in mind the difference between a deadline and an estimate. But what if your whole surroundings are driven by deadlines? What if some people first decide, okay, until, I don't know, end of this year, this must be ready. So what happens then? So I can tell you, for example, in my experience in the company where I work, it's not unusual that we are kind of deadline driven at times. So sometimes, it's not uncommon in the past that we have got a deadline from top management saying, okay, until, but the funny thing is that they don't say the whole package has to be ready until that date, but they say, okay, we have this deadline, so tell us what can we have until that date. So it kind of makes the whole discussion a little bit from the other perspective, because once you have that deadline, and then what we have had to do is to, okay, keep informing, okay, until that day we can have this and this ready. So it's the whole negotiation between the project managers and the product owners on what is a minimum viable product, what is it that they can have until that date. So it's a funny approach. I'm not saying that it's the right one, that is the best one, but it's also something from my experience that sometimes it's inevitable that to have a deadline fixed, and then you gotta somehow find a way to cope with it, deal with it. So that's what I want to add.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can definitely resonate with that. Go ahead.
yeah, that's a really interesting. Decision makers, as you talk about that, and actually, decision makers could be all of you watching on the call as lead devs. You need some idea of how long different parts of a project are going to take to make that sort of opportunity cost decision of do we do this or this in order to meet this deadline. And going back to the question, why do we need estimates? That's that's one of the reasons I'd give, because it's a question that's often asked. Like, estimates are always wrong, so why do we bother with them? But that example from Daiany, I think, illustrates just exactly why they're useful.
Yeah, and sounds like it's not only just estimating the task that is important, right? There is also like the scope, also thinking about the actual time that we have. It seems like that is also, it could be challenging to estimate that, right? What do you think, Dominika?
Yeah. If you have to say how long this big project will take, it's really difficult, and every level of estimations is a bit different. But you need to make sure that not only you talk about time, but also about priorities. So if you're talking about a big project, just make sure you know what's the must-have, without which finishing this makes no sense, and go with that. Also, if you have deadline-driven management, let's say, or you're really delayed on your project, and what now we need to release on this and this date, and what happens now, is really talk about priorities, and look through what we can cut out from the scope to achieve what is a success for everyone, not only the team, but also the product owner or clients. So priorities together with time is a good start for discussion.
Great. So it seems like we covered a bit on like what happens with fixed deadlines, the difference between deadline and estimate. How about we just switch gears a bit and we move on to giving our audience some tips? Can we get estimates right? Can we do that well, reliably?
So maybe I'll start because okay. I'll start with continuing what I just said. So it's combining time and priorities, and generally I found talking to people about time very useful. It's maybe not revolutionary, but we often don't talk about time. So if you say something will take a week or a month, add why you think this way. If someone else says it will take a week or a month, ask them, okay, but why do you think this way? What you counted in this estimation and what's not included? Because talking about time with our teams or stakeholders creates common understanding of time. So everyone is involved, and thus we constantly improve our team's estimation abilities. So Daiany, you probably want to add something now. I finished.
Yeah, sorry. I just said I said technically can't give reliable estimates because there's this. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's this planning fallacy, which says that we all humans have this tendency of underestimating how long it will take to finish a task. So it's kind of a bias, an optimism bias that we have. We have this tendency. So the fact that we assume that it's just an estimate, just as Amir said, it's an estimate, it's by default something that can or cannot be true, is already helpful. But what about acknowledging that the fact that it might be that there may be more than one result on more than one result of this act as itself of estimating. So, for example, we say, okay, we believe it's going to be ready until end of the year, but end of the year is it's a value. It's a single value. It's a one single event. What if we give a range instead? What if we say, okay, it's gonna be ready with certain probability till the end of the year or earlier than that? So what I'm trying to get into is, what if we use a probabilistic thinking for giving estimates? So this is what I can give you my own experience. We've been using a method called the Monte Carlo simulation, which takes the historical data of the team and uses it to create a probabilistic forecast on how long it's going to take until you're ready with some certain amount of tasks. So you will communicate something like with 80% of probability it's going to be ready the end of March or earlier than that. Or if you want to be more, this probability will give you the level of confidence on the word that you're saying. So if you want to give more confidence, then you talk about some 90% probability or something like that. So this is an approach that we have been using in our team or in our department for the past years in order to cope with this deadline-driven development that I told at the beginning. So since that is negotiations going on with this minimal viable product, so we also do a forecast continuously. It means we give a first estimation and then we refine it as we know more, because at the beginning obviously there are so many unknowns and variables that we don't know, so we refine it more and more and more. And this is an approach that has worked for us.
Yeah.
And
so
I
in
can
this case, like,
also
do you take into account the complexity or who is going to do the project?
Well, of course, this works also for teams who have not worked together before, but you need to have some amount of history, so some amount of resolved issues together, so that it can be used as a source for that Monte Carlo simulation. So yeah, and as I said, it's a probabilistic way of thinking. So you wouldn't, it would take into consideration all those variations, like the team fluctuation or the size of the items. Some items are going to be bigger than others, and so on. So it all flows in, because at the end, as I said, it's a simulation, so it's a probabilistic way of thinking.
I see.
Yeah.
Amir, what's your take on that?
So my number one tip is don't be afraid of getting it wrong. Estimates are never going to be perfect, and if you're using your best judgment, collaborating well with the team and your product owners, UX, everything else, and sort of being aware of some of the blind spots you might have, that's really the best you can do. And you're not always going to get it right. So don't beat yourself up for getting it wrong. But also, don't be afraid to sketch out estimates when you know your estimate is going to be wrong, if that makes sense. Like that sketching out process in itself can be really useful.
So in this case, it seems like there are quite a lot of unknowns that we need to deal with in estimation. So how do you allocate buffer for that? What is your strategy? Maybe Dominika can shed some light.
Amir wanted to say something, so start and I'll add later.
I was just going to say, that there are going to be unknowns. That's the nature of what we do as software engineers. We are exploring uncharted territory. We're building new things that have never existed before. If it already exists, then why aren't you using the thing that someone already built and provided a solution for, right? So it's not repeatable. It's not like running a marathon. You could do that same distance a number of times and understand what your time is. or various other things that are easier to estimate. But what you can do is, break tasks down into smaller chunks to get feedback on what you're doing early, and draw a little bit on the experience of other people that have done something similar as well. Sorry, Dominika, back to you.
Yeah, I believe Yenny also wanted to hear something about buffers, and that's something I think is really useful, because there are things that are maybe unknown that happen regularly, like I don't know, maternity leaves or paternity leaves or holidays. So there are a lot of calendar things you can add to your project timeline when you're estimating this bigger picture. Also, sometimes if you work in defined time boxes, like, I don't know, sprints in Scrum or whatever, and you plan for next one, it's useful to take a look at the calendar, because if half of the team is leaving for holidays and then there is a company party in next week, then probably you won't be able to do much in this sprint, let's say. But like some funny buffers I sometimes added in my projects was skiing season buffer, because I had a lot of skiers in my team, so I knew that somewhere in winter people will take a week or two off to go skiing. Also, I already mentioned paternity leaves, but also buffers for sick leaves when you live in a place where weather is ruining health of everyone in autumn or winter, which is what happens in Poland very often. From other things, if you have, for example, to work with some other people in company, and then that you need time to coordinate, add buffers for that. I once worked on a project with a team from different company, and they really pushed for the very, very detailed timeline, but they also wanted it to be short as possible. So I was like, okay, I work with radical honesty. So I show them, okay, this is our really, really tight timeline. I added this buffer here, this buffer here, this buffer here, this buffer here. And they were asking for two things. One, okay, but this buffer, they are not really useful. Can we remove them? And second, what I know that they told to a major stakeholder was, okay, they will do it faster, but they will just never admit that.
So how do you handle this situation where stakeholders push back on the buffers that we add?
I always say, if you want to hear the truth, that's the truth. And if you want to hear it will be faster, I can tell you that, but this will not be truth. So if you want
Daiany,
something faster, we need to cut out.
I think I just something quickly that came to my mind is that you were saying that communication is very important, to keep the expectations, right. So what if every time, like you say, if the stakeholders want to take away all those buffers, but if every time then you just go with them through the scenario, what happens if we don't deliver? So what are the consequences? What do we do? So, to have like a kind of emergency plan and practice it every time. So this idea of doing that regularly might help also to build more confidence on and also to relieve a little bit of the pressure of the team. Well, I think.
This is what we did.
So it seems like, from my experience, asking developers to give estimate is more difficult than asking them to do the actual task. Do you have similar experience, and how do you motivate your team to do good estimates?
Don't make them do them.
Amir?
Sure. So I think that the most important thing I'd say to someone in the team, first of all, is understand what is being asked. I think it's probably the number one reason why you give wildly incorrect estimates is a misunderstanding of what is actually being asked for. you're jumping into conclusions and thinking it's a lot simpler than it actually is. And then, this is less of a tip for someone in my team, but actually more for people watching as lead devs. One thing to watch out for in your team is watch out for sort of overconfidence, like people that are just, that they think they're great. This happens more often maybe in junior people, and they think they can do everything very quickly. Maybe they're a bit naive because they've just joined. They haven't realized how long it takes to do certain things when you need to collaborate with a large organization in a large company, and the amount of process around that. That can often lead to sort of estimates being shorter than they should be. But another factor that I've seen, and it certainly happened to me as well, is imposter syndrome can also deflate estimates. So, when I've joined teams of engineers that are all like incredible people, all working really, really fast and really, really productive, I sort of look at that and I think, I should be doing that task as quickly as they can do it, right? And I've fallen into that trap of giving an estimate for how long I think it should take me to do that task, rather than how long it actually will take me, or how long deep down I know it will take me, because I've still got to ramp up. I still need to learn the thing before I do the thing. So that I think that's a good thing to watch out for in your team.
Anything to add, Dominika?
Yeah, sure. Well, estimating is always a bit personal. Sometimes it's about ambitions. So you really want to say you will do it faster when someone is asking, or you're afraid to give estimates in front of team, especially if you're not seasoned, if you're a new one or a junior developer. You just want to do the right thing, say the right thing, and not say what you really feel. So what you can do as leaders in your teams is build trust between all the team's member, and also build trust between the team and the stakeholders, because pressure from the, let's call it, outside world can make your team feel not safe to give the estimations they really believe in.
Yeah, I definitely have similar experience on that as well. I think building the trust between stakeholders and the team and helping them understand their concerns as well, and being transparent about that was really helpful. Anything to add here, Daiany?
Well, what I can tell is, again, from my experience, it helps a lot when you have already history of the performance of the team, that you can use that. There are methods out there. The Monte Carlo one is just one of them that you can use that data, that historical data, and then you can reach a point where you don't have to make all developers in the team give a time estimation for each item. You can just count the items. So this is something that we reached actually, and when we have a new requirement, we just count the steps, the number of stories, or however we call them, work items that need to be done to implement that, and then throw that into that simulation that is taken that input from the historical data, and then you get a date. You don't need to use the time to give a time on your own. So this was for us really motivated, because we felt like it's amazing. We don't have to give item-based estimates anymore, because we have that tool that is helping us. It's just a tool. But of course, the important thing is that a process is continuous. You need to refine that forecast continuously, because every time there are changes, there are maybe hidden refactorings that we didn't know at the beginning when we counted the working items, or etc. But my point is that there are also ways out there that can help the team, a team which has history already, to use that history and to just count the items, and it gives a kick to the teams that they can use their time better for implementing stuff and not for giving an
I
estimate.
see. So like a continuous forecasting approach.
Right.
Great. So we are We got a lot of questions from the audience, and I also want to give an opportunity for me to give you these questions to answer. So some good ones. There's one on, so for example, if you charge for your work in terms of time, in this case, how would you reconcile the deadline versus estimation approach? Maybe Daiany, you have something to share there?
If you charge for your time.
Yeah, like how do you manage the cost for a project if you're providing a probabilistic estimate to a customer? Like for example, if you say there's a 70% chance the project will take 2 months, so do we charge for 2 months of work? Like how would you negotiate that?
Well, what I can tell you from our experience is that usually we in our context is that usually we get a budget allocated. So basically, we just have that amount of money there dedicated because our stakeholders are business units and the whole logistics concern where I work. So the air freight, sea freight, road freight, the business units give us the IT people the requirements, and then we have to so mostly we have budget allocated already. So we are kind of negotiating the scope. It's more about a scope negotiation there. So they have to decide, okay, what is really, really, really important to have ready until that date when they are given a deadline like that. There are some other cases where they are already not given deadlines, so they are like, okay, give me as much as you can as soon as you can. So it's about the conversation that constantly the project manager, the product owner is having with those stakeholders. So we're doing that forecasting continuously, and they are continuously speaking very closely about that. So that's how it happens in our case.
I see. Anything to add here?
Yeah.
I think she covered everything.
Yeah. Another question is, how do you estimate when it's not clear which developer and hence their skill level will be responsible for the implementation?
Oh, good question. Well, I would say the developer doing the estimate, doing the work should provide the estimate if possible. But so going back to what I said in my last point, it's all about and Dominika touched on this as well, having culture where you have trust between teams and those asking for the estimates, and where there's a lot of respect and people are humble. I think puts you in a better place for one person in the team to say, all right, this would take me 2 days, and someone else to say this is going to take me 4 weeks, right, for the same thing, and for people to be okay with that. And I think providing that environment is the most important thing.
All right, another question. How would you go about estimating when you are required to use a technology that you're not familiar with?
I'll take that. Again, I call this buffer, but you can call it whatever. So I would add, it would be quite a big one, a buffer for getting to know this technology. And depending on how skilled are the people who are going to do that. So do they have like a broad group of technologies they know, or are they used to working on different things, or are they just junior? They just know one programming language and they need to dive deep in some different things. So for someone who works across a lot of technologies, looking into another one may not be that big issue, but for someone who always work with one thing, now changing to another is a big issue. So I'd be clear that, okay, we don't have competence to work on this now. We can gain them, but at a cost of time.
Anything
I've
to
got
add?
a point I could add there, which is actually more general than just this question. But I'd give the advice to get involved as early as you can in the project. You don't need to wait until the requirements are signed off to start doing some valuable work. And that can include figuring out how some technology works, building prototypes, proof of concepts, to sort of give yourself a better idea. When you then come to need to estimate on those requirements, you'll have a better understanding of what you need to do at that point.
All right. One question is, an audience wants to hear anyone's opinion about no estimate. Is that realistic?
Well, the politically correct answer would be it depends.
Yeah.
Because personally, I don't believe there is a hard separation between no estimates at all or the best estimations in the world, because it depends on many factors, on the context, on how well the team works together, how about the technological expertise, like we were just saying, if we have to include time for proof of concepts, or and so on and so on. So I believe it's most important to first of all know what is the decision that our estimates are contributing to. What's the decision that's been affected by the value by this estimate? If no significant or reasonable decision can be found, then it's a sign that an estimation would be waste of time. But on the other hand, if yes, then of course it helps also to give more context to the team, to they understand better what's at stake with that estimate that they're given. So my opinion is no estimates at all. It's not really something. I don't believe in that approach, if you ask me. No estimates at all. There will always be some kind of estimation. At least, even in our case, that we are not giving time the estimations for items anymore, but we still estimate the amount of working items. It's still an estimation, because how could you possibly know that it's exactly that what is needed to be done? So that's my opinion, is that no estimates it's a lie. Very controversial.
I'm really glad that someone asked this question though, because it is a question that comes up, and it's a good point, right? Like people say, software engineers, right? We're working on really hard problems. We're extremely talented people, and we're basically changing the world with what we do, right? So why keep pestering us, asking how long it's going to take? So I preempted this and I looked up a couple of examples. Did you know that Michelangelo was asked for an estimate for the completion of the statue David, because it was originally going to go on the roof line of Florence Cathedral, and lots of other statues were going to be there. And if they didn't have an estimate, or we got it wrong, it would have delayed the completion of the whole cathedral. So, we're all very special people, but everyone needs to, an estimate is always useful nonetheless.
That's great. Yeah. There's another question that I quite like. How do you manage the balance between the higher level estimates, like the broad definition of t-shirt sizes, compared to the fine-grained estimations on the feature when you start working on it?
I'd say depends on what your team needs and what your stakeholders need. Because if you have a high level of trust and highly educated stakeholders and very experienced team, you just go what works best for them, for the engineers, and the stakeholders understand that. But if you work with an inexperienced team, for example, and for them it's easier to grasp this detailed points, for example, because otherwise they can't imagine how to describe the task or how to divide the task, then it may be more useful. But I found it also that for stakeholders who are not familiar with the concept that, for example, if you use points, they are not exactly like time boxes. It might be easier to use some abstract like t-shirt sizes, or even totally not sizes, but I know I heard about using fruit or marking features with like golden, silver, platinum, copper, and the team declared, okay, we will deliver one golden item every sprint, for example, with Scrum approach. So if you have stakeholders who need some abstract way of talking about these estimations, this makes a lot of sense.
All right. One question here. When we're solving the problem of estimates, is the delivery of the feature and the happiness of the stakeholders the most important part for each of you?
Yes. Short answer. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's why we come. I was going to say that's why we come to work every day. I'm just still in my bedroom, but this is why we're building everything we're doing. Right, it's for the user, right? So yeah, if you're 1 week late, but it didn't impact the user, that's fine. Equally, if you're 1 day late, but there was a huge impact to the user, that's fine, right?
I see. Yeah.
I'd add that.
Dominika, say something?
Yeah. Yeah, user happiness, but also in some part team happiness. I mean, if user is happy what he got, but we have technical debt, it's not what we want to work for.
And Daiany, anything to add there?
Yes, well, actually, the best answer, in my opinion, is yours, Amir. Yes, clear yes, loud and clear yes. That's the most important for us is our users, customer satisfaction, because why are we building a product for if it's not for the customer, right? And yet, there are some contexts, like in mine, where at some let's say sometimes it's more important that our teams are more predictable than our teams are fast. Even though for the user it might mean that something gets delivered a little bit later, or the customer satisfaction gets a little bit affected, let's say. But this predictability in our context I would dare to say it's even the most important factor, because there are so many planning projects, planning plans from different business units connected to each other, that when we from the IT can deliver can be reliable on the dates that we name, it's even most important, because it builds that trust with our stakeholders, and it allows the flow of more features and money to build those features, and so that's the reason why we have also taken more disadvantage of taking more the advantage, not disadvantage, of this continuous forecasting approach, because it kind of helps with our credibility on those dates that we are delivering on our forecast. So sometimes there might be some scenarios where that predictability is more important, and when the teams know that, it can also help them to get a little bit relieved of pressure. So I imagine in startups probably it's different, because you gotta deliver very fast to get time to market as fast as possible. But yeah, that was my
Cool.
I'll just caveat the initial one word.
Okay.
The answer to that's yes, but yes over the long term, right? So you might need to build some infrastructure or something in the short term that will delay something for the user, make things worse for the user in the short term. But if it's improving things for the user in the long term, then that's fine.
All right. Yeah. Thank you all. So if you have one sentence to sum up the takeaway for the audience, what would you say? Maybe start with Amir.
In one sentence, I'd say solving estimates. It's a problem of people, not process. You know, the most important things to get right are humility, respect, and trust in the team, and creating that environment where people can estimate and feel safe doing so. You know, beyond that, make sure you set the expectation that it is an estimate, it's subject to change, right? It's not fixed, and communicate progress along the way.
All right, Dominika?
Okay, often the biggest value we gain from estimating is not the estimate itself, but the conversation we have about time, scope, and priorities. So choose whatever works well for your company, your team, your people, and your project, and talk to people about time and priorities. Talk and talk and talk.
Daiany?
Yeah, from my side, I can only add to complement from my colleagues, Dominika and Amir, about that Monte Carlo method. Google it, take a look at it, and it's worth it. This probabilistic approach, it can bring about benefits to your team, believe it or not. And yeah, I will put some resources about that on the Slack later on, or if you have any more questions later, just I'll be around.
All right, thank you all. We'll be moving over to the estimations channel, so talk to you there.